I think what we have heard last night and the talks today is the importance of being honest. And what I want to talk about is how you can be even more honest than you think you can be. You have to be honest. You have to build honesty in your organization so problems are raised earlier. Even when you are doing something that's dysfunctional, people will tell you. You hire people for potential. You're going to have to give them developmental feedback to achieve that potential. You want to build a culture, a purposeful organization. People are going to act in ways that may violate that. You've got to be able to raise that, confront them, and deal with it. And if you violate it, you've got to be able to handle that honesty. And I want to talk about how you can build that in. We really are scared about being honest. We're afraid we'll hurt the other person. We're afraid that demoralize them. We're afraid they may get mad at us. We are afraid that it may hurt the relationship. For over 50 years, we have studied at Stanford how you can build more open, direct, honest relationships. And we've taught it to students in that class, formerly called interpersonal dynamics. Students call it touchy-feely. They do a lot of touching, and they have a lot of feelings, and I want to talk about what this is. So, from this work, there are two primary principles that we believe. One is that you can say almost anything to almost anybody if you stick with your reality. Now, if I've had 2 glasses of wine, I would say you can say anything to anybody if you stick with your reality. But we put the almost in because we're academics and we cover ourselves. But you really can say anything. Furthermore, we believe that raising difficult issues, confronting other people, if you stick with your reality, can build the relationship, can build the connection. Now, what do I mean when I say stick with our reality, stick with your reality? It turns out there are 3 realities when people interact. So we have Jim on the left, and we have Janet on the right. There are 3 realities there. Jim's objectives, that's his reality. Only Jim knows that. That gets him to act in a certain way. Words, gestures, nonverbals, tone. That's the second reality. He sees that, and Janet sees that. That's a reality in common. The third reality is the effect of that behavior on Janet. How does it make her feel? Does it make her feel accepted, rejected, closer to him, distant, more trusting, less trusting? And how is it going to affect her response? Is it going to get her to withhold information, to share more, trust him more? Only she knows that reality. But Jim has to have that reality if he's to be effective. Now we see up there the word net, and we see an arrow going back and forth. There are actually 2 nets. One net is between Jim's intention and the behavior. And the second one is between the behavior and Janet's reaction. Let's look at the first one. I want you to think of a tennis net. In tennis, you can't play in the other person's back court. You've got to stay on your side of the net. But think of what most feedback, dysfunctional feedback, is in organizations. You just want to dominate. You only think of your own area. You're not really committed to the purpose of this organization. You always have to have the last word. Notice that if Janet makes those statements, she's over the net. Mind reading him about his intentions and his motives. No wonder he's going to get defensive. Even worse, if she's sort of spun up about this, she may say, you're really egotistical. The trouble is you're insecure. The trouble is you just want to be in control. And we put personality labels on it. No wonder people are hurt. No wonder we have problems. She is not sticking with her reality. So let's imagine that Janet is starting to feel that Jim's dominating her, that he's sort of controlling her. That's her conclusion. She's making up a story. The question is, what's the behavior? Is she deriving that idea because he interrupts her? Because he disagrees with most of what she has to say? Because he has to have the last word? She needs to focus on what's the behavior. And let's assume it's because he interrupts her a lot. I should know that. I interrupt all the time, so that's very familiar. What's the effect on her? First effect is, what does it make her feel? What are the emotions? We heard from Brian today about the importance of being in touch with your feelings. How's it going to get her to respond? So rather than saying, you just want to dominate, could she say, Jim, you tend to interrupt me quite frequently. It annoys me, it makes me feel distant from you, and it decreases my willingness to raise new issues with you. Now, what if Jim were to say, that's your problem? One of the clues I want to give you is if somebody else's behavior is bothering you, it's likely to be costly to them. So Janet has only to say, yeah, it is my problem, but it's our problem. We work together. We're interdependent. It turns out that when you interrupt me a lot, I stop listening to a lot of what you have to say. That's not in your best interest. It decreases my tendency to want to bring up new issues with you. That doesn't help us. It's our problem. We need to deal with that. Now, the other thing is, if you stick with your reality, if she had made the first comment about, well, you just want to dominate, Jim has only to say, no, I don't. She says, yes, you do. No, I don't. And they're in a pissing contest, and nothing good happens. When you stick with your reality, it's indisputable. So if she says, when you interrupt me, this is how I feel, this is a consequence, Jim can't say, no, you don't. He's over her net. So it's indisputable, and therefore you can go somewhere with it. Now that may sound quite simple, and the model is quite simple, but it's difficult to implement. Now, most of you are too young, I'm afraid, to remember a former comic strip with Pogo. Do you remember Pogo? He said, we have met the enemy, and they is us. The problem with this is not the model. The problem is you're putting it into effect. Now, I know this very well because not infrequently, when I'm in an argument with Eva, my wife, I go over the net. And she says, you teach this stuff. Why don't you do it? Oh, wait. We're all human. So the first way it's our problem is that when we are bothered by somebody else, we start to make up stories. So I'm going to tell you a little story. I talked recently with my cousin, Sarah, who I'm very fond of. And Sarah reported an incident with Linda, a friend of hers, who had gotten mad at Sarah. And Sarah said, she does this pretty frequently. I do something, and then she gets mad at me. I think I know what's going on. And Sarah said, well, it's because of how Linda was raised and how she sees me. And I said, Sarah, you're making up that story. Oh, I'm sure about it, she said. So the trouble is not that we make up stories about what motivates other people. The trouble is we start to believe it. It's our story. And as our story, it's our story, but it ain't the reality of what's going on with the other person. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that we don't focus on behavior. If you say to somebody, you have the wrong attitude, that's not a behavior. That's a conclusion you have made on a series of actions. Can you dial it back and point out the behavior? And what's important about that is if you can point it out, it's indisputable. So if Janet says, you frequently interrupt me, Jim can't say, no, I don't. Or if he does say it, she can say, yes. You did it 2 minutes ago here, 4 minutes ago there, 6 minutes ago there. When you focus on behavior, it's very specific. It's indisputable. The other thing is, we don't share the impact on us. We heard this morning about the importance of vulnerability. Do we share the feelings? Can Janet say, I'm really feeling put down. Actually, I'm sort of feeling hurt when you interrupt me all the time. That's her being personal and being vulnerable and being powerful. Because sharing your feelings should come out of strength. That I feel good enough about myself, I can share what I feel. So we don't do that enough. The other problem is that because we are bothered by somebody else's behavior, we tend to focus on ourselves. That's natural. And we lose focus on the other person. So if you want to give feedback to somebody else, the question is, what's your intention? If you want to hurt them, if you want to ream them out, ignore everything I've said. Blast them. Go over the net. Do a personality assessment on them. It'll make you feel good. It'll kill the relationship, but what the hell? It makes you feel good. Can you speak to the other person's best interest? So you're in a meeting, and you're somebody else. Jim has been interrupting. You walk out with Jim. Can you say, hey, Jim, I need to talk to you about something because you're doing something that I think is hurting you. One of the things we say at Stanford is feedback is a gift. Because you see, Jim doesn't know the impact of his behavior. If you don't know the impact of your behavior, you're shooting in the dark. And you don't hit many targets when you shoot in the dark. So Janet has crucial information that Jim needs to be more effective. So you're a colleague of Jim, and you have made this observation of the effect of his interrupting. So you can say, you're hurting yourself, and I want to talk to you. This is what you're doing. Here's the impact on me. This is how I felt when you interrupted. So feedback is a gift. It may not feel like a gift to the recipient, but your intention, if you really want to be honest and build a relationship, is to speak to the other person's best interest. Now, the other nice thing about this model, very simple model, hard to do because you're going to be over the net, you're going to forget behavior, you're going to forget sharing the impact on you. But the nice thing about this model is it helps you when the other person's over the net. See, unfortunately, the world hasn't heard this theory yet. You have. And other people are going to be giving you feedback. So let's imagine, I said that I interrupt a lot. So let's imagine somebody comes to me and says, David, the trouble is you just want to control. You want to control interactions. Well, I'm first going to feel defensive. Can I hold back my defensiveness a little bit? Or I may want to share it. I may want to say, gee, Joe, I'm feeling a little defensive, but let me put that aside. Then can I push him back over the net? He's over my net. Can I say, gee, Joe, that's not my intention, reality number one, but clearly I'm doing something that's giving you that impact, has that effect. What am I doing that has that effect? You see, in giving feedback, other people are likely to raise issues. we sort of say, well, wait a minute, I didn't intend to do that. I intended to give you feedback, but now you're giving me feedback. But see feedback as an opportunity to learn. So now I've turned an attack into a learning experience for me. What am I doing? That's giving that effect. So again, use the model, speak the other person's best interest, stick with the behavior and the effect. But there's something else. Feedback is a process. We'd like to think it's nice and clean. Here, I've thought about it. I'm going to give you this feedback. You're going to say, oh, thank you very much. Unlikely, but we like that. And that's it. It's not. Feedback is a messy process because the other person is wondering what's going on. They're taking it in. By the way, beware of the person when you give them important feedback and they say, thank you very much. I have never heard that before. I am going to take that in and change. Do you believe them? Hell no. It's gone in one ear and out the other. You want the other person to say, oh, no, wait a minute. I don't do that all the time. You say, that's right. You don't do it all the time, but you did it here, here, and here. And anyway, you do something like it too. Well, I may do that, but we can talk about feedback you want to give me, but I want to point out you're doing it and it's hurting you. So feedback is a gift if that's your intention. The other person may not kiss you on both sides of the cheek right afterwards. But if you are doing that, that's how you can put people first. So one of the phrases we use, we steal from the Hallmark slogan, and we say, I care enough to say the very worst. See, I think if I see you hurting yourself and I don't raise it, that's not kindness. That's not kindness at all. Kindness is say, we have to talk about this. I'm bothered about what you're doing, and I think it's hurting you. Now, one of the questions is, when do you raise this? Now, you don't want to walk around being the savior of everybody and giving everybody feedback all the time. That may not be the sort of culture climate you want to build. So you're going to be selective. And often we say to ourselves, oh, it's not worth it. It may not be worth it, but I want you to test it. And I want you to change the it. So reframe that and say to yourself, he's not worth it. I'm not worth it. The relationship isn't worth it. And if your conclusion is it's not worth it, it's not worth it. But if you frame it that way, you're going to likely think, maybe it is worth it. Maybe it's worth it to take the chance. The other thing which I want to say is that you always have choices. When students say, I can't, we don't let them do it. We say, can't speaks to a physical impossibility. I can't jump over this building. I can't go to the top and jump off and live. What you're doing is you're choosing not to. So when somebody says, I can't, I say, no, you're choosing not to. That's the choice, but you're making that choice. So when you see somebody acting in ways that's hurting them, that's hurting the organization, that's hurting your culture, and you say to yourself, well, do I say something or do I not? Remember that everything you do has an effect. If somebody is doing something that's hurting the culture and you let it go by, you are implicitly approving of it. You are supporting it. So I want you to always be aware that you have a choice. You have a choice about whether to raise something. You have a choice about whether to ask for feedback. You have a choice about giving feedback and sticking in there. But you always have a choice. And I think that if you can build an organization which is more honest, which is focusing on developing people, developing yourself. That is the best way you can meet Evergreen's goal of putting people first. Good luck.